Contestable everyone, welcome to class 12 biology. With this video we will start the new chapter from your textbook, chapter number 7, that is evolution. So what is evolution? In your textbook, the definition for evolutionary biology is given as the study of history of life forms on earth. So evolutionary biology is the study of history of life forms on earth, and the definition of evolution is the process by which different kinds of living organisms are believed to have developed from earlier forms during the history of earth. So the different kinds of living organisms that we see around, they are believed to have developed from earlier forms, right? So change has occurred, and that particular process of change is known as the evolution. Evolution, the definition of evolution in Wikipedia is given as such: evolution is change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successful generations. So these characteristics are the expressions of genes that we have already studied in genetics part, that are passed on from parent to offspring during reproduction. So these are the definitions of evolution that I can find in various websites. So you may want to note them down. So this person shows the importance of studying evolution. So Theodosius Dobzhansky in 1973 made this statement: nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So if you don't understand the evolution properly, if you don't understand the mechanism of evolution, if you don't understand the process of evolution, nothing in biology will make sense. So that's what he said, and he shows, and his statement shows that the understanding of evolution is very important in order to make sense of the living world. Okay, so that is the thing. So in this video we will start with the origin of life. When we discuss about the origin of life on earth, we have to understand that origin of life on earth is just a small part in the history of our universe. Our universe is really old. In fact, it is mentioned that our universe is about 14 billion years old. In your textbook it is written 20 billion years old, but I have written 14 because of a reason that I will mention shortly. And after the origin of universe, our earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago. And on earth, the life originated about 4 billion years ago. And from that point onwards, life diversified through the process of evolution of life. Right? And now when we talk about the origin of universe, the most accepted theory is the Big Bang theory. So the most accepted theory among the scientific community is the Big Bang theory, which explains the origin of universe. And according to this particular theory, universe is about 14 billion years old. So therefore I have written 14 instead of 20, which is mentioned in your textbook. You can write either of them, it's fine. Okay, so now let's discuss a little bit about the Big Bang theory. What does it state? So the Big Bang theory explains that our universe originated from a huge singular explosion, right? From a huge singular explosion which occurred about 13.8 billion years ago. From that explosion, a large amount of energy was released in the form of heat and radiations. And later on, when things started to cool down, hydrogen and helium started to form. And later on, under the influence of gravity, galaxies started to form, right? And these galaxies are still moving away from each other, which is another proof that the Big Bang has occurred, that explosion has occurred. So these galaxies are still moving away from each other, and it also proves that our universe is still expanding. So this is a brief gist about the Big Bang theory, right? According to which our universe is 13.8 billion years old, right? Or about 14 billion years old, right? And our Earth is a part of one of these galaxies, right? So that galaxy is the Milky Way galaxy. So in the solar system of Milky Way galaxy, Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago. I told you already that Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, right? So Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago in the solar system of a Milky Way galaxy. And about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was just a molten rock, right? The conditions were inhospitable for the life to form. So if we just try to imagine in this pictorial form So let's try to say that, let's say that this is the condition of the atmosphere of primitive Earth. So the primitive Earth, right, it was of really high temperature. I said it's a molten rock, right? It was just like a molten rock, tremendous temperature. There were volcanoes, right? Volcanic storms erupted. There were ultraviolet radiations which came from the sun, right? And there were no atmosphere, but at the surface we find some gases like water vapor, right? Methane, ammonia, and hydrogen gases, right? And these gases, they reacted with each other, and under the influence of all this energy, right, they broke down and they reformed, right? And later on, when things started to cool down, right, ozone started to form, right? And what happened when things started to cool down? The water vapor, they formed clouds, right? They condensed and they formed clouds, and rain fell down. And rain fell down for so long that all the depressions on the planet, on the planet Earth, were filled with water, and it formed oceans, right? And in the water of these oceans, life first appeared about 4 billion years ago. So the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago, and life appeared 4 billion years ago. That means it took about 0.5 billion years for the life to first appear on Earth. But how exactly did life came on Earth? People started to wonder about it, and many theories were proposed regarding how life first came on Earth. So among them, there are theories like the theory of panspermia, right, which was proposed by early Greek thinkers, and they said that units of life called spores came from outer space, right? And from these units of life called spores, all the life originated on Earth. So that means all the biodiversity that we see on Earth are aliens, right? And this particular theory is favorite among astronomers, and they are still looking for evidences that life could possibly come from outer space in the form of spores which could be present on asteroids. Another theory is the theory of spontaneous generation. This theory was also proposed by one of early Greek thinkers, and this theory states that living creatures could arise from non-living matters. So non-living matters like decaying and rotting matter like straw, mud, etc. So what made them think that living creatures could arise from non-living matter? They thought that maggots, they originated from rotting flesh. So rotting flesh is the non-living matter, and from this non-living matter, maggots arose. They also thought that fleas originated from dust. Right. So taking these as examples, since people thought that maggots came from rotting flesh and fleas came from dust, Aristotle synthesized the idea of a theory of spontaneous generation. And since its synthesis, the theory was taken as a scientific fact for about 2000 years. For 2 millennia, the theory of spontaneous generation was considered a scientific fact, and it went unchallenged for about 2000 years. But then in late 1850s, Louis Pasteur put the theory of spontaneous generation to the test. And through his experiments, he not only disapproved the theory of spontaneous generation, but he also stated that life comes only from pre-existing life. He said that life cannot arise from non-living matters. It can only arise from pre-existing life. And in his experiment, what he did was he boiled a liquid broth containing dead yeast. Right? He boiled it in a flask which contained a curved neck, and after boiling he let it cool down, and he kept it there for some time, and he observed that in this particular flask microorganisms did not grow. But then when he broke the neck of the flask, he observed that microorganisms now started to grow in the broth. Through this experiment, he proved that the microorganism which grew in the broth, it came from outside as a contaminant, since this curved neck was preventing anything from coming inside from the outside, right? So therefore, this particular broth remained microorganism free. But when the curved neck was removed, microorganisms contaminated and grew in the broth. So the life, it did not originate, or it did not grow, it did not came about from non-living matter, but it came from outside in the form of spores, right? So this is the experiment done by Louis Pasteur to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. Now the question of how first life forms came on Earth remained unanswered till 1920s. In 1920s, these two people, O'Brien and Haldane, proposed a hypothesis in which they stated that the first form of life could have come from pre-existing non-living organic molecules such as RNA, proteins, etc. They also stated that formation of life was preceded by chemical evolution, which means the inorganic molecules present in the atmosphere of primitive Earth reacted to give rise to organic molecules, and the organic molecules in turn gave rise to the first life forms. So according to them, in the atmosphere of primitive Earth, the inorganic molecules like water vapor, methane gas, ammonia, hydrogen gas were present. And due to the energy provided by high temperature, volcanic storms, and ultraviolet radiations, these molecules, inorganic molecules, they reacted to give rise to organic molecules like RNA and proteins, and the organic molecules in turn gave rise to the first life forms. So that was the hypothesis proposed by O'Brien and Haldane. But it was just a hypothesis. There were no experimental proofs, right? Till in 1953, S.L. Miller, he recreated primitive Earth's atmospheric conditions in the lab. So this is his lab setup. Right here we can see the diagrammatic representation of his lab setup, in which he recreated the primitive Earth's atmospheric condition. So in this particular chamber, you can see all the gases that were said to be present in primitive Earth's atmosphere, like methane, right, like ammonia, hydrogen gas, and water vapor. So here he boiled the water to produce water vapor for the primitive Earth's atmosphere. And in order to simulate the lightning storms that were prevalent in the primitive Earth's atmosphere, he created electric sparks. And the electric sparks, it increased the temperature to 800 degrees Celsius and thereby provided energy for the reaction of these inorganic molecules. And then he observed that there was formation of organic molecules like amino acids. And when other scientists, apart from Stanley Miller, they tried to recreate his experiment, they observed the formation of other organic molecules like sugars, nitrogen bases, fats, and pigments. So this proved that the hypothesis proposed by O'Brien and Haldane was true. So based upon the hypothesis proposed by O'Brien and Haldane and the work done by S.L. Miller, we now have this version of biogenesis, which is now widely accepted by the majority of biologists. Now, in this version of biogenesis, we can see that there is formation of organic molecules from inorganic molecules, like we have discussed before. And from these organic molecules, the first non-cellular forms of life is said to have formed. And these non-cellular forms of life were probably giant self-replicating molecules such as RNA, protein, polysaccharides. So these molecules, they somehow had the property of self-replication. That means creating copies of itself, right? And therefore, these molecules, they were said to be non-cellular forms of life. They are not cell yet, right? And it occurred about 3 billion years ago, right? The formation of first non-cellular forms of life from organic molecules, it occurred about 3 billion years ago. And later on, these non-cellular forms of life, they gave rise to first cellular forms of life, right? Probably they were unicellular and they occurred only in water environment. So this particular transition is said to have occurred about 2 billion years ago. So we have this version of biogenesis over here, and I said that it is accepted by the majority of the biologists. Not everyone agrees to this, but majority of biologists, they agree with this particular version of biogenesis, or the formation of the first cellular form of life. We now have the most accepted version of biogenesis. But after the formation of the first cellular form of life, how did we come to the point where we have lots and lots of biodiversity around us? Biodiversity means different life forms, right? Now we can see different forms of life on this planet Earth. And we have agreed to the point that the first cellular form of life arose about 2 billion years ago. And from that first cellular life form, how did life diversify? How can we explain that particular process? Right? So there are certain theories regarding that one. Right? And one of those theories is the theory of special creation. It is mentioned in your textbook. Let me tell you that this is not a scientific theory. This theory, the theory of special creation, is found only in religious literature, not in scientific literature. And according to this theory, the Earth is about 4,000 years old. The Earth is only 4,000 years old according to the theory of special creation. The Earth was created by God 4,000 years ago. All living organisms were created by God as such. They haven't undergone any change, right? And the biodiversity was, is, and will always be the same. Okay, so these are the connotations that are given in the theory of special creation. Now, this particular theory was predominant up till 19th century. So in 19th century, scientists like Lamarck and Charles Darwin, they strongly challenged the ideas expressed in theory of special creation. For example, Lamarck, he proposed a theory of evolution through inheritance of acquired character. So in order to understand his theory, let us take an example of our present day giraffe. We all know that giraffe, they have got long neck, right? So how exactly did giraffe obtain this particular long neck, right? So according to Lamarck, the ancestor of our present day giraffe was a short-necked one, right? The ancestor was a short-necked one. So this short-necked ancestor, it tried to reach the foliage on higher branches of the trees, and its neck became a little bit longer. And this acquired trait of a longer neck, it passed it down to its offspring. And the offspring, in its lifetime, it tried to reach higher foliage, and thereby its neck became a little bit longer. And that acquired character, it also passed down to its progeny. So like that, the present day giraffe, it got its long neck like that, right? So according to Lamarck, what it means is, if you use an organ more, that organ will become more developed in the subsequent generations, right? If you use organ less, that organ will slowly degenerate. So that is the Lamarckian theory of evolution, right? And this theory of evolution has already been discredited. It has been disapproved by other scientists. There are experiments which were conducted in order to disapprove Lamarckian theory. This is not given in a textbook, but I thought it will be interesting for you to know. In our old textbook, the Lamarckian theory of evolution was there, but in your textbook it is not given. And then we have our famous Charles Darwin, who proposed the theory of evolution by natural selection. So Charles Darwin, when he was 22 years old in 1831, he took a voyage in a ship called HMS Beagle, and he traveled around the globe for 5 years, right? And during his voyage, he made certain observations, and based upon his observations, he made certain conclusions, and these conclusions are written in your textbook, right? So he said that existing living forms share similarities to varying degrees not only among themselves but also with life forms that existed millions of years ago. There had been extinctions of different life forms in the years gone by, just as new forms of life arose at different periods of history of Earth. There has been gradual evolution of life forms. So that's what he said. In simple terms, what it means is, he said that the living organisms, they share certain forms of similarities, right? Let it be structural or functional. They have got certain forms of similarity. Some organisms are more similar, some organisms are less similar, right? And these similarities, they not only share among the ones which are currently present on the Earth, but they also share the same similarities with the extinct organisms, the organisms which had lived millions of years ago, right? And he also has said that there has been extinctions on this planet Earth, and there as well as formation of new species, right, on this Earth. And he said that there has been gradual evolution of life forms. Life forms have changed throughout the time in a very slow, in a very gradual manner. And according to Charles Darwin, that gradual evolution has occurred by natural selection. So natural selection is the mechanism of evolution. So according to Charles Darwin, variations in characteristics is inbuilt within any population. So within a given population of an organism, there are variations in characteristics, right? He didn't say how these variations came about, but he said that in a population, there are variations in the characteristics. And he also said that among these individuals, there are certain individuals who have characteristics which enable them to survive better than others in a particular natural environment, right? And those who have got that particular characteristics which make them survive better, they will slowly outbreed the others, right? In other words, what it means is those who are better fit in an environment, they leave more progeny than others, and these therefore will survive more and hence are selected by nature. It seems as if the nature is selecting them, right? Since their character is suitable to survive in the nature, natural conditions, so the nature, it seems as if they are in turn selecting the ones who are better suited in the environment, right? So this is called as natural selection. So let us try to understand this one by giving an example. So let's say we have a population of rabbit. So inside this rabbit population, we can see that there is a variation, right? Variation in characters. Some of them are white and some of them are brown. And this is just a variation in coat color, right? So apart from that, there is another variation in which the white rabbit is a much better runner than the brown rabbit, right? So if chased by a predator, the white rabbit can outrun the brown rabbits. The white rabbits can outrun brown rabbits. So now, if there are predators around in their environment, right? So what happens? Slowly, what will happen? The white rabbit will outbreed the brown rabbit. The brown rabbit will slowly decrease in number. So you can clearly see that the nature or the environment is selecting the white rabbits, right? Because of its character variation in which it can run much faster than the brown rabbit. Okay, so you can clearly see over here that there is variation in the characteristics. There are variations like white and brown, and some of the characters, like the one which makes the white rabbit outbreed the brown rabbit is that one of the characteristics is it can run really fast from the predators, and if there are predators present, the white rabbit can outrun the brown rabbit. Brown rabbits will be eaten by the predator, and therefore more white rabbits will survive, and slowly the white rabbits will outbreed the brown rabbits. So that is his concept of evolution of organisms by natural selection. Okay, so I hope you are clear regarding the evolution theory of evolution by natural selection as proposed by Charles Darwin. If not, you can watch more videos on our YouTube channels that will get your concepts clear. In the next video, we will discuss about the evidences for evolution. So what are the evidences available for evolution? Okay, so please read about this one before you watch the next video. Thank you.